Hey guys, Alex here, host of Jiu-Jitsu Radio. Today's guest is a good friend of mine that I've actually been meaning to sit down and pick his brain for quite a long time. He has an immense amount of knowledge on all things fitness related as far as supplements. He is a formulator. He is well known throughout the fitness and bodybuilding industry, and I believe him to be an expert in things such as nootropics, something that I'm very interested in. This is the Guerrilla Chemist, so please take the time to follow him on Instagram and his YouTube channel. He has a ton of information that he throws out there just for free, and you guys should definitely tune in if you take any sorts of supplements or proteins or pre-workouts, whether it's for jiu-jitsu or just fitness altogether. It's something that you should be knowledgeable about as to what you are putting into your body and what it actually does to your body. So without further ado, here is the man himself, the Guerrilla Chemist, Bryan Moskow. The Guerrilla Chemist, Bryan Moskow. Bryan, thank you very much for showing up, man.
Thanks for having me, Alex.
In case no one knows who you are,
Which is most people.
which is kind of the way that I prefer to go. You are the CSO, or the Chief Science Officer for Blackstone Labs. Kind of give us an idea of what that actually means for people.
So most of my stuff is I do all the formulations for all our products. I do most of the R&D as far as reading papers and trying to find new supplements, and I contact all the manufacturers to see if there's something I like, if we can get it, can we get it, sourcing, expenses, stuff like that. And then I do a lot of the product information videos, so you'll see on our website that I try to break down all of our products. We have a series called Behind the Muscle where I kind of go in depth in the science, and PJ does more of the layman stuff. So my role is really to get down to the people who are actually interested in how things are working inside the body, not just like how to take it and why to take it.
See, that's the cool part too, is that I met you at one of the camps, training camps that they've done here, and the thing that really has always blown my mind is the development of a supplement. Some companies really just kind of throw stuff together, but you actually take the time to go into the science at a different level that most people even show, let alone actually do. But you actually go out there and take your time to show people this is this element or compound, this is what it does, and mix with this and this. These are typically the results you can expect. So my question to you is, how do you actually go about the process? How do you start with, even just finding and putting something together to all the way to the point where you have a finished supplement?
So the cool part about my job is my background is in chemistry and biochemistry, so I can read papers and understand what they're talking about. I can decipher the results, which I don't know a lot of people in this industry if they even do read journal papers or anything like that. So the first thing I'll do is come up with an idea for a product in a genre. So say with glycolog we wanted to do an insulin mimic that was very strong, because I feel like those are up and coming products versus everyone has a pre-workout, everyone has a protein, that sort of thing. I wanted to do things that were a little bit different. So I would come up with a list in my head of maybe 10 or 12 ingredients that I know have potential to some way mimic insulin or the pathway or the cascade that insulin does in the body. And then I go to the research, and so I'll start pulling papers and reading them and see what the doses are, how it worked. Is this in humans? Is it in animals? If it's in animals, I usually don't do it. Everything that I put out, I try to get in the human study. So for glycolog, it has 6 ingredients. I think I pulled 22 or 23 papers to really see how we can combine these ingredients to get the most synergistic effect out of the product without going overboard, because if you don't know certain things that interact with others and your blood sugar crashes, and then you're kind of screwed. And so some companies think more is better, which is a very common practice in this industry. And a lot of times that's not the case. A lot of times it's, especially when you're dealing with multiple ingredients in one product, you really have to know what the limits are of how much you can use of each ingredient, because they're going to have this compounding effect. And so after I do the research, then I'll kind of narrow my list down and say, okay, let's use these, and then I'll see what's the strongest extract I can get of this plant for whatever the active ingredient is. I'll try and source it from one of our manufacturers, and then the very last thing is price. Obviously, every product has to have some price limit. Fortunately, with Blackstone, they have given me a lot of wiggle room. So when we, like for example, with Glycol, when it first came out, it was a more expensive product than what we wanted to, but they saw a lot of potential in it, and so they trusted me and allowed me to use a stronger ingredients and ingredients that other companies weren't using at the time, so that way we can make a solid product. And so after everything is sourced and I get raw samples, I start in my lab, I'll start putting together capsules I have a digital scale that weighs to the 0.001 milligram, so it's very precise. And so I'll start making samples, and then if you've seen on Instagram, there's pictures of me with a note to PJ and a little cup of some pills saying, try this and let me know what you think. Here's when to take it, here's how to take it. And so I do a lot of that in the lab. We do a lot of in-house testing, and then, for example, even with glycol, we did in-house blood glucose testing, which I don't think any company is really doing stuff like that. I wanted to make sure that this product is doing what I think it's supposed to do. It's because it's different. Like a pre-workout, you either feel it or you don't, depending if we're talking about stimulants and stuff like that. So this was something that I wanted to make sure that it worked, what we wanted it to do. So we actually took 10 people that work in the office, took their blood glucose levels before, took it after, when I gave them 50 grams of Gatorade, pure glucose, and the results will be posted very shortly. We are applying for a patent for that, so that legal has them. But what I can say is that the product worked, and that the blood glucose levels were definitely significantly lower, statistically significantly lower than the placebo.
That's crazy though, that the fact that you guys, that you can sit there and leave stuff like, here PJ, take this. So there's definitely a huge trust factor going on in there.
PJ trusts me completely, and I earned his trust by having conversations with him, but even before we started, he met me, or I met him and Aaron at the time, and we talked, and they kind of saw that I did know what I was talking about with regards to science and chemistry. And so we have built a very trusting relationship where I'll give him capsules and he trusts me to take it. And I know PJ is very sensitive to stuff, so I usually back off a little bit on the dose that I give him versus I give maybe some of the other people in the office. And if he reacts to it well, then I know it's a good sign.
That's pretty cool though. So then, one of the funniest things is following you on Instagram. It's just, if nobody knew, it's like, who the hell is this guy? What the hell is going on? But you guys are so willing to put your information out there and put the stuff out there so you can see the science behind it. It's not just empty claims. So, what goes on, at least when you're really kind of like measuring things out? You have your giant board with all your notes, and then like other ones to the side. So how do you really break it down on what is the dosage for stuff?
So I have a huge whiteboard in my office that's double-sided, and I list out everything that I'm doing on there and the dose range of what was effective in the literature. And then I'll see if anything has any counter interactions that I know of, and what things you can't take with it. And then I will start basically alpha testing little doses. So I always err on the safe side. My big thing is always, you can always add more later, but you can't go from a lot to a little. Yeah. And so if I have to increase things, I will. Usually it's very rare that I'll have to decrease things because I do go incrementally up. But yeah, everything's laid out on the board. I start measuring out from the different samples how much I want to take for each one, and I systematically will start putting them together. And sometimes I don't even use all of the ingredients at once. I want to make sure that these two work well together, because in the literature and real life can be two different things sometimes, unfortunately. So I always err on the safe side. So when I put something together, maybe I'll put 2 together or 3 compounds together and see how that works. Maybe I don't need all 6, to get the desired effect. And so I'm pretty systematic in the way that I do things, just from my formal background and being in a lab and at Georgia Tech and the training that I've had. So I don't ever want to put anyone in jeopardy of something that I'm doing, because my name is on all of those products, my logo and stuff. So I really want to stand behind what I'm doing, and the last thing I want to do is add something too much or too little so that people don't like what I'm doing.
That's so nuts, though. Like, just the fact that you're so willing to take the stuff yourself. And I think we both know, I mean, I'm newer into really understanding the world of nutrition and supplements and things like that, even with like the training of the stuff that I've done. So it's crazy to me just to see, it's like there's probably not that many companies or even like people that are willing to say like, yeah, I'll take this before I even give it to anybody else.
Well, you and I have a trust, because I remember I told you at the Arnold.
Yeah, you kind of set me up.
I said I'm working on a new stimulant, because you said the Arnold is obviously very long days. Yeah. And you were getting tired and you didn't want to keep taking energy drinks and stuff, and so you trusted me enough to give you something, and I think that it works pretty well. Yeah, I mean, honestly, so for those that weren't there, basically what happened is I was working at the Arnold Classic, was it like 4 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago, a few weeks ago? First week of March.
Yeah.
Beginning of March.
So I'm walking around. This was like the second day, running on fumes, just because we were working on so much, and I was probably running on like 4 hours of sleep tops. And then I had the conversation with you. As I'm running around between booths, you come up with a tiny little like water bottle, say, "Here, drink this." And I don't know if you just caught me at the right time of I was running back and forth or what, because I've had friends do the same thing and it doesn't work out with the same results. To try something, and it was actually a huge jump of energy for me, but it wasn't like taking a pre-workout. Like, I don't take pre-workouts anymore. The last time I did, it was just, it just didn't work out for me because of my training. I need something totally different, but this was a jump of energy, a jump of focus. I definitely felt the ramp up. That was the weirdest thing. Usually when I take like a pre-workout, it's kind of like a sudden burst, and then I'm like, oh, I'm here now. And now, man, this is where I got to stay for the next like 3 or 4 hours. But this kind of ramped up, and then it kind of evened out at a good consistent pace, and then tapered back off again at a good rate. So it was crazy because it got me through the entire day. I was fine. I didn't crash. Usually after like a pre-workout, there's like such a drain of a crash. So it was kind of crazy. And then as soon as we're done, and I was texting him like, I really trusted this guy out of nowhere. It's like, because if my own friends that I've known for years hand me a bottle, drink this, like, my first question is, what's in it? So you just drink it, what's in it? So I know what to be prepared for. But I rode that ride. That was actually pretty cool. Like, thanks for that one. It was actually pretty cool. So was that one of the new things you're working on?
Yeah, when we had to reformulate one of our pre-workouts, one of the ingredients was just recently taken off the market, and so we're trying to come up with similar replacement ingredients, and that was something that I stumbled across actually probably 6 or 8 months ago, and it was sitting on my desk, and I had tried it when I first got it. I remember it was really good, but we decided to go in a different direction, and then when we needed to replace it, I was like, oh yeah, I have this new stimulant that I think is really good. And to my knowledge, it's only in one other product. I haven't seen it in anything else. And so we started beta testing it at the office. So I got, I don't know, like 50 grams of it. And we're talking about something you take at the milligram level, like 100 milligrams or so. Mm. And we got a sample, and I started giving it to people at the office to see, and everyone really liked it. And they said what you said, you kind of feel, so some of the guys in Blackstone are younger, and they call it the come up. And so they're like, we can feel the come up of this, and then it hits. So it wasn't a very direct, like when you take caffeine, you go from 0 to 100. This was something that slowly will build up in your system, and then all of a sudden you feel it and you feel great, and you're awake and focused, and then there isn't much of a crash from it, at least from the people that have taken it. Everyone reacts differently to everything, and so it was kind of a novel stimulant that I found, and I really like the focus aspect of it, because to me, I'm not about a lot of caffeine and heavy stims like that. I was when I was younger. Now that I'm older, I'd rather just do nootropics and stuff like we'll talk about in a little bit. So that's kind of where that came from, and then we're putting that in a product that will be released very shortly.
That's kind of exciting though too, because I can say I got to test out the product.
Yes.
I was a guinea pig. We have the man himself just walked in, kind of crashing the party. What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Coach Neil Hill. If I would have known, I was bringing in money. I'm not a stripper, Neil. I don't need money.
Strip for you, buddy.
Yeah, right. You need a lot more money than that.
Just $300.
That's it?
Yeah.
Come on, Neil. I'm a little more than that.
Maybe 10 minutes.
Okay.
Or 2 minutes.
2
minutes for the best way.
All right, give me 1 second. We'll take a quick break and catch up with Coach Hill, and we'll be right back.
Track.
All right, we're back. Sorry for the quick break. So yeah, no, I mean, the fact that I got to test that out was actually pretty cool. But the one thing I know that you and I have kind of talked about, and I consider you an expert on, and it's one of those things that have become more and more popular the past few years, and that's nootropics. So for people that don't really know, can you kind of give them an idea of what a nootropic supplement is?
Sure. So these are focus compounds. So these aren't a caffeine. They're not a central nervous stimulant. They are more increased levels of acetylcholine, which is a excitatory neurotransmitter. So that gives your brain a higher function capacity versus like inhibitory, which is like GABA, so it makes you go to sleep. So these are things that excite your brain and make your more oxygen go to your brain, so you're thinking at a higher level, and you're usually more focused without the jitters that you would associate from stimulants. And so people call them smart drugs. They're not drugs, but people call them that, and people are always looking for like that limitless pill and things like that. So I got into these a few years ago when I wanted to cut out caffeine, and I wanted to see if there's anything that can give me a focus that I can work all day without having to keep taking, caffeine or coffee or whatever you drink. So I started really researching them and getting down to the chemistry of it, because that's what I love and that's what I do, and seeing how you can combine different ones to get a synergistic effect, knowing if you know the mechanism of action of one, then you can look at a different compound and say, okay, I think it's going to do this interaction here, so if I add this with this one, then I can block the breakdown of this, and it's just kind of like a cascade of events that happen once you start taking more than one thing. And I really enjoy them. I got PJ really into nootropics. We had a little formula going around the office called Brain Fuel that we've been messing around with. It was just the in-house name, but it was a combination of a couple of ingredients that were racetams is the name of the class of the molecule, and those are a synthetic compound, but they're sold online. They're legal at the time you can take them, and those work well with choline sources, because, like I said, your brain runs on acetylcholine, and so things like alpha GPC, dimethylaminoethanol, CDP choline. These are all sources of choline that your brain takes, and so what happens is the racetams work really well, but they deplete your choline levels because your brain is gunning at such a higher level.
Right.
And so you're depleting your levels of acetylcholine, and then you can get dehydrated, and then you can get headaches and crash. If you supplement on top of that with a choline source like alpha GPC or CDP choline or something like that, it kind of counteracts the depletion, because now you're giving your body an exogenous source that goes along with the racetams that you're taking. And based on the research that's available, usually you want to do a 4-to-1 or a 6-to-1 ratio of your racetam to choline. And so when I was doing like Hype Extreme, for example, we use alpha GPC as our choline source. We use huperzine A, which is in tons of products, including was it Alpha Brain?
Yeah.
And that is a compound that inhibits the breakdown of acetylcholine. So once you give alpha GPC, which is a choline source, and then you use huperzine A, which blocks the breakdown of acetylcholine, you get a very synergistic effect, and it lasts much longer. Because you're not the enzymes that break things down and metabolize them are kind of being slightly inhibited. And so those are the kind of things that I look for when I'm doing research. Is there any way to extend the half-life of this by using another compound to mitigate its metabolism? And so that's kind of what I do when I read papers, and I try and see what can we mix things with, and how each thing works slightly differently, and so how can I combine these ingredients to make it like a super pill, so that way you're extremely focused, but you're not hopped up on caffeine, because like you said, you don't really like that feeling. Yeah. I personally don't like that feeling. And so to me, this was a natural progression to the next step, and that's why I've been throwing them in our pre-workouts that I've formulated for Blackstone, like Dust Extreme and Hype Extreme, and people seem to like them so far. And in my opinion, they help mitigate the crash. So a lot of pre-workouts are really good for 45 minutes or so, and then you just crash.
Yeah.
And so I truly think that the combination of the nootropics with your traditional caffeine or some of your aliphatic amines like DMAA or 2-amino-isoheptane, these things that are out now, if you combining them with the nootropics, I truly think helps with the crash prevention, and that you get more of a smooth taper versus if you just took caffeine. Everyone knows that works for a little bit, and then at like 2:30 you kind of fall asleep at your desk.
Yeah.
So I personally like them better, and if you're a caffeine person, I do recommend you can take them together, and they work very well.
Yeah. See, like you brought it up, like the way that I got introduced to it was through Alpha Brain and on it, and I loved it. I told everyone and their mom about it. Mm-hmm. Like it was just the best thing that ever happened to me, because I would take them and I would just run. Like I was burning the candle from both ends, but it wasn't a caffeine. I was focused. I was clear. I made everything that I needed to do was so much easier. And then at night, what I liked even more was that it boosted up the lucid dreaming aspect of it. Mm-hmm. The only thing that threw me off was when I wake up in the morning, it was one of those things that it's not one of I can wake up and like check the time. Oh, I got another hour. I'll go back to sleep. No, as soon as I open my eyes, that's it. I'm on. There was no way of coming back. And then they created a new formula for whatever reason. I don't know what happened. And I'm not knocking the company by any means, but nowhere near the same effect. Like I could probably take 6 of them and it still feels like nothing have ever even entered my system. Is that something that you notice like a lot of with other companies, that all of a sudden they change and they just kind of lose their initial real I don't know, I guess the popularity of it or the effect of it?
For me personally, I've been not in the industry working, but I've been a consumer of supplements for probably almost 15 years, like when Eno Explode and stuff like that came out. So I've seen the different reiterations of products go over, and I don't know what happened with Alpha Brain. I'm not familiar with the company or anything. I don't think they were using anything illegal or that's illegal now, because usually that's not the case. It's more of probably a cost factor. I know a lot of companies, if they have new owners or something like that, they kind of formulate from cost, or they have to hit a certain margin, and then they start cutting doses of things because ingredients add up and they're expensive. And if you have 30 servings, something could be only like 40 cents a serving, but then you have 30 servings, and then you have to bottle it, and with everything else it starts to add up. So I think that some companies are going that way, but me personally, and what I do is I'm always trying to, move forward. And so, at least for me, and what I do is I read journals, like Natural Products or Medicinal Chemistry, and I try and see what's the new thing out there, and specifically whether it's nootropics, whether it's muscle building, fat loss, whatever the case. I'm very interested in seeing what natural herbs are coming into light, because I truly believe that there's herbs that can mimic any pharmaceutical. I mean, most pharmaceuticals have their origin from natural products. Morphine is completely natural from opium, and then they took that compound and then derivatized it synthetically, as a chemist did that, and then made all these prescription drugs. So I think that nature does provide us with a lot of options. It's just a matter of, can we find them? And so by me reading these journals all the time, it at least allows me to have access to the newest information on what's going on and what they're finding. Like, for example, I was just brought a new ingredient from the Amazon that's been growing there for thousands of years, and it has a very potent vasodilator naturally occurring on the level of synthetic nitrates, and much stronger than like citrulline or agmatine or any of those things that are out on the market. And so these are the type of things that I constantly try and look for when I'm looking for products, because everyone always wants what's that next big thing. And so I don't know how many companies have someone like me, maybe not educational wise, but someone that can at least have access to the research and look for new things, versus a lot of, we talked about like copycat companies. There's a lot of those in the industry. And so that's to answer your initial question, that's another thing, is that there's a lot of copycat companies, so people change formulas to make sure nobody's copying the other.
Right. That was actually one thing from one of your podcasts that kind of blew my mind. I never realized this, but that it's possible to patent and copyright the compounds that are in there.
Yes.
Like, so someone can literally just buy up a patent and say, no, you can't use this product at all, and potentially screw over a lot of athletes and just any day person that could get a benefit out of like these certain things.
Yeah, unfortunately, there are, I believe the vernacular is patent trolls.
Yeah.
And so these are people that they go online and look for expiring patents, whether they're medical, whether they're natural, or whatever the case. They'll buy up a patent, and then they'll hold on to it. And then if they see somebody using that ingredient, they send them a cease and desist saying, we own the patent, you can't use this. And that was a big headache when I was trying to formulate a Hype Extreme.
Yeah.
Someone who will remain nameless had a patent and was trying to say that we couldn't use this ingredient, and I formulated that product over 5 times before I figured out the product that it is now. And it's just frustrating. There's nothing wrong with patenting an ingredient if you do the R&D. There are plenty of patented ingredients that we use in products, or that I use personally. It's just a matter of your business ethics. If you're buying a patent to just kind of screw over people and make a quick dollar, that's kind of shady. But if you're patenting something that you've put, hundreds of thousands of dollars in R&D and all this time and effort, then yeah, you deserve it, because you cultivated this new product, and that you're proud of, and you've gone through, clinical trials are very expensive. We're working on a clinical trial now for a new ingredient, and it'll have like 24 people, and we've already been quoted like $200,000.
Yeah.
So these patented ingredients cost a lot of money, because someone takes the time to make sure that they work the way they're supposed to, and they do clinical research in humans, in healthy subjects, even in athletes. So there's so many variables you can go into for a study to get a specific outcome of the population of which you're looking. And so I think that's where the real value is, versus the people that kind of just buy up patents and say like, no, you can't use this, you owe me money, or I'm gonna send you a cease and desist or sue you or something.
Well, that's what happened with Tesla, right? He created all these crazy inventions, and then the patents ended up being owned by I forget who it was, but somebody else. So he basically died broke, but he created some of the greatest inventions known to man.
Tesla is probably the most underrated scientist ever.
Hands down. And that's, I think part of it is because of the fact that he didn't get to keep his own patent, so other people took credit for his inventions. And there's so many things. My craziest thing is like he was supposed to have created the basically like the death ray or whatever it was. You ever heard that? Like the guy was a total genius. So it's like if you actually look into his story, the guy was an absolute genius.
Yeah, Tesla was. So I have a physics background too, and one of my favorite classes was electromagnetism, and so we learned a lot of stuff that Tesla did once you harvest the power of electricity and magnetism, or electromagnetic waves, and how they're related and stuff. So yeah, he had things that would change the world, but like you said, he kind of got screwed on the patents, and then I believe he died alone.
Yeah,
and is under-recognized as one of the greatest scientists of all time.
Yeah, I think one of the things that people, I mean, totally off to the side, but one of the things that blows my mind the most, and I think it's something really hard for people like to grasp, is the fact that he could literally create something in his head, test it out, find the flaws in it, go back, fix it, and basically have an entire thing built before it's actually physically built. It would be built, working, operational in his head, so when he went to go do it, it was done. It was already set to go.
Yeah, he had an amazing understanding of the physics at the time, and the way that if you make a magnetic field, you create an electric field, and if you move an electric field, you create a magnetic field. And so he would utilize this for a lot of different inventions that he had, and he was smart enough to realize, like you said, in his head, which even like the most brilliant physicists still need to like have engineers help them build stuff. We're talking about over 100 years ago that he was doing this stuff, and he was absolutely brilliant. And even if you can understand the physics of it and the mathematics, the building of it is very complicated, and that's where you bring in an engineer friend or something. But he was able to do everything, and I'm obviously a huge fan of him. And we're talking about Nikola Tesla, by the way.
Not
the cars.
Not Musk.
Yeah, not Elon Musk. I'm not saying he's not.
He's great too.
Yeah.
But I imagine having Tesla with some nootropics. Then we would have all been in flying cars by now for sure.
Yeah, if Tesla had some modafinil or something like that, he would be flying by and would have changed the world even more.
So that's the thing, like, I think that's the one that's closest to the limitless drug, and it became like the designer smart drug and stuff like that, is the modafinil. So, like, kind of give me more of like an in-depth look into that. Like, why is it something that's so just kind of almost like a well-kept secret for like higher ups and CEOs and stuff?
So initially, most things that were pharmaceutically made were amphetamine based, and that would give you, like Adderall, and that would give you focus if you take it and don't need it. If anyone's ever done that, you get extreme focus, but you get anxiety, you get the jitters, you get all these side effects. And so when they created modafinil, this was a non-amphetamine based structure. So the chemical structure is different, but it still hits your D2 dopamine receptors, like your DAT, which is your dopamine active transport, and it still has some of the same properties of the amphetamine, but it's not an amphetamine, so it doesn't give you the negative side effects. And so this drug does work well, and it does give you like that extreme focus. There's I believe so in chemistry they're called enantiomers, and they're basically, if you look at your hands, they're mirror images of each other, right? So it's called non-superimposable, so you can't put your hand on top of each other, but they're the same. The only difference is the way it's laid out in space. So in chemistry, the atoms, whether in 3D space, where they attach matters. And so they have a system called R and S. And the active one, I believe, is the R of modafinil. And then they made that into, I think, Provigil is the one that, or Nuvigil. One of those is the active one. And the modafinil was initially made as a combination of those two, which is called a racemic or racemic mixture, meaning 50% of the active and 50% of the inactive. Mostly because when you synthesize these in a lab, it's very hard to control the stereochemistry of just making one, and it's even harder to separate the two once you have it. So it's just cheaper to make them all as a racemic mixture. But to get back to the initial question, I think it's just someone got hold of a script and they're like, and passed it on, and like, this is really good, you should try this. And now nootropics are crazy big with CEOs. So not even our world of training MMA fighters, bodybuilders, people that exercise. Now you're talking about like people that want to have a 12-hour business day or a 15-hour business day are taking these things to be smarter and make better decisions, and they can go longer because of the way these work in the body. Like I said, with increasing oxygen flow to your brain and increasing, all the different neurotransmitters like acetylcholine and things like that. So your synapses are firing at a much higher rate than normal, and so you can think more clearly, and you can even make like quicker decisions. And they do a lot of tests on these things in labs as far as memory and cognitive function. And you remember that game Memory, where you had the cards and you have to pick the lion and you try to find out what the other lion is? Those are some of the tests they do for these things, and people are significantly better when they take these drugs or compounds, like there were racetams I talked about. So these have tons of data behind them, and they work. If anyone's ever tried them, they know that.
Oh, I mean, like I said, for me, it was a night and day difference. Like the second that I started seeing actual physical results from my performance, as far as when I was taking like the Alpha Brain the first time around stuff, I went. It's like half my paycheck, I just stocked up. I was like, let's do this. I'm living off of this stuff. I don't care. And then that's the other thing, though. I mean, I think that's one of those things that, is there something that people should really pay attention to? I mean, we talked about this a little bit as far as where you burn yourself out. I mean, just like a pre-workout, you start just getting used to it and it doesn't have the same effect. Like, is that something that people kind of put themselves at risk? Like these CEOs that need to do those 12, 15-hour days, and they're just like, screw it, I'll just keep taking these.
So there's some arguments in science on whether adrenal fatigue is a real thing, and from my perspective, I do believe that you can have adrenal gland dysfunction. And for those of you who don't know, your adrenal glands are what's responsible for your body adapting to stress. And so if you're familiar with your fight or flight that most people learn, that's your adrenal glands releasing norepinephrine and epinephrine, which is adrenaline. And that causes your body to release fat for energy, so you get that quick burst of energy and jitters and things like that. So every day, no matter what your days look like, your body does this daily for any type of stress, whether it's at home, whether it's mental, whether it's physical, doesn't matter. You start adding stimulants and amphetamine-based things and all of these different compounds, you're doubling the effect. So not only does your body have to adapt to its normal stress, now you're taking compounds that do the same thing, so your adrenal glands, in my opinion, can get fried or oversaturated or dysfunction because that you keep stimulating them to release all these hormones. And that's when certain people can have a rebound effect, or you can fry them out. And so I actually formulated a product, not to drop products on people. I've been working hard on something to prevent tolerance to stimulants and help with function like this, because it's such an issue in my industry, because people always take the pre-workouts,
just burn themselves
caffeine,
out,
right? And so one of the things people can do at home if they want is magnesium is a cheap supplement anyone can take. Magnesium can block some of the effects that happen when you take caffeine or when you take some of these stronger stimulants, because basically your body, everything binds to a receptor. So you take caffeine, it binds to the adenosine receptor, and then from there the adenosine receptor activates your N-methyl D-aspartate receptor, and from there that causes your body to release dopamine, and then dopamine is our body's reward system. So magnesium has been shown to inhibit the pathway by which caffeine is activating these different enzymes, and so they have used that in the treatment of people who have, I don't want to say addiction issues, but high tolerances to things like Adderall or things like these really high stimulants, or people that are addicted to caffeine or take large amounts of caffeine. time off is always the best.
Of course.
Because your body will naturally reset, but sometimes you do need things like magnesium and zinc that change the way your receptors bind, or these compounds bind to the receptors, and change the outcome. The outcome of what these things do in the body. And so, it's always good to, take things into account as far as the dose you're doing. Like I said, always start off with a minimal dose, but also take into account that you can't take something 24/7, 365. Your body just will at one point will say no.
Yeah.
And your biochemistry kind of changes, because every time you take something that's exogenous that your body doesn't naturally have, your body has a natural mechanism to break it down and dispose of it. And so the more you take of something, the more upregulation your body does of the enzyme that breaks it down. And so if you take a lot of caffeine, your body upregulates the enzymes that break down caffeine. And so you have to keep taking more and more, because your body makes more of the enzyme that breaks it down. And so by taking time off and by taking things like magnesium and zinc and Korean ginseng, things like that, you can help your body recover and kind of downregulate the expression of the enzymes that break these things down.
So you said like the magnesium is a good way to kind of mitigate the effects of like the caffeine burning you out. But if we're talking about something like the adrenaline that comes in, say like for like fighters or anybody that's competing, where the big issue is always the adrenaline dump for the first couple of minutes. I mean, I've had it for jiu-jitsu tournaments where that first round is always the worst, because the adrenaline rushes, hits you, you literally feel your body's feeling you don't react quicker. Is that something that would kind of work on that as well, or is that something that's really more for recovery?
No, it's something that can help, because adrenaline is released, like I said, from your adrenal glands, causes your body to release adrenaline as a response to stress. And so when you're in, like say, a fight in UFC or any type of MMA environment, your body is releasing tons of this adrenaline and norepinephrine because you're ready to fight, literally. And so you can take things like magnesium, and that will prevent some of the buildup that you'll get as far as burning out, if that's what you mean. So I wouldn't say it's recovery. I think recovery is more time off, when compounds that all activate your N-methyl-D-aspartate receptor, that seems to be, from my research, the hub by which all of these stimulants, including adrenaline and norepinephrine, or stimulate. That receptor causes release of ions like calcium, magnesium, sodium, potassium. These are ions, and they flow from one channel of your cell to another, and that stimulates a whole cascade of events. So if you can control the one event, then it could prevent, several events down the line.
The chain effect going down.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. That's crazy though. I'll have to try it out maybe next tournament. Just take a couple of magnesium.
Magnesium glycinate is from the research I've seen, the one that's commonly used because it's a very bioavailable form of magnesium. If you go to the grocery store, a lot of the times they sell magnesium oxide, which is terrible bioavailability. Your body can't really use it.
Really?
Yeah, it's very insoluble. And so that's why I recommend something like magnesium glycinate, because that one will actually get into your system and your body can use the magnesium.
See, that kind of blows my mind then. Like, that's something that's just out there. That anybody can, like you say, can pick up at the grocery store, but at the end of the day, it does nothing when you get a different derivative of it, and then it's something that's super useful for you. Mm-hmm. So what's then the best way for someone to sit there and say, like, oh, well, I need this? Or let's say, like, how would I get that? Like, that version of the magnesium?
I mean, they sell it in stores that you definitely can get it online. It's just something you got to look for. You know, Amazon is huge for carrying almost everything. Yeah. I'm sure they sell it on Amazon. You just have to know these things, and unfortunately, there's a big lack of education in this industry and in your field.
For sure, absolutely, especially for jiu-jitsu fighters like that. There's so many people that I can tell you that just come in, I just took a pre-workout. Like, why would you take a pre-workout? Like, do you know what we're about to do for the next 2 hours?
So let me ask you this, because I'm not super familiar with them. Do they have do jiu-jitsu fighters have, a nutritionist or a coach, or is it just people that teach them how to train?
The most part, like, honestly, as far as, like, if you're talking about the top tier, like, jiu-jitsu guys, there's not that much money in jiu-jitsu, but there are guys that make good money off of jiu-jitsu that do tournaments all over the world. I think the biggest thing that it comes down for these guys, it's the nutrition as far as, I gotta take fish oil, stuff for my joints, stuff for just not even recovery as much as just basic supplements, and then the rest is eating properly. So you see a lot of the guys are very lean because they train so much, and it's really cardio. And then they'll do the strength and conditioning, so they need the recovery aspect for that. So for the most part, it's always stuff like, just protein, and they'll take like BCAAs. That's really what gets pushed on the most. I don't think a lot of guys really look into the aspect like we talked about, where it's like the nootropics. How I've taken nootropics, to go and train. Completely different, really training day for me because of how I'm using my brain and how much I'm paying attention. And then for the recovery, there's not that much. There's a couple of good companies that do have proteins and things like that. One of my favorites, like a.k.a. Organics, and their stuff, a majority of their ingredients are organic. Perfect for recovery stuff. And their whey protein, and they have like a hemp protein and stuff like that. That's really the extent of it, though. No one really gets into the nitty gritty of like, all right, I need something that'll help me, have stamina to my muscle, to my workout. And obviously, like we talked about, like the pump for us is totally different. I can't have a pump because then that means I lose my grip. Yes. The difference between doing sets, it's like I have to be able to go for 5 minutes, 6 minutes, or whatever the set is, and then it can be something where it's kind of slow with bursts of speed for when we scramble, or it could be a 5-minute nonstop scramble.
Right. So instead of a vasodilator that a bodybuilder would use, you would need something more like a bronchodilator, so that it opens up your lungs. You have more breathing capacity and the capacity to use oxygen better, or things like that can cause your body to utilize oxygen better. We talked about, right when I got in here, we had some donuts, and you're like,
yeah.
And he's like, aren't you on a ketogenic diet? And I said I was up until recently.
Until I threw donuts at you.
Yeah. Until I came down here actually for the week. And so one of the good things about a ketogenic diet, or even supplementing with exogenous ketones, is the fact that it helps with your mitochondria in the way that you use oxygen. And so glucose or carbs, you use more oxygen to make ATP, which is our source of energy, versus fat oxidation use less oxygen. And so if you can use less oxygen for actually making energy, you have more oxygen to utilize when you're training. And so this helps lower your body's VO2 max, and so that you can train longer and not be winded very easily. And so I don't know how sustainable it is for a jiu-jitsu, because I'm not familiar with the rule, like how long you go and what you're actually doing. I know you're tensing your whole body for basically 5 minutes at a time.
Well, it depends. I mean, the key is like you don't want to be tense the whole time. You want to be as relaxed as possible for as long as possible, and you only use the energy when you need to. It just sometimes it happens where you're rolling with someone where it becomes a battle, and you're just nonstop.
Right. So if that is the case, then you want to have reservoirs of oxygen. You want to use it better, and in your mitochondria to use to break down fats for energy instead of utilizing carbs. And that could be something that's beneficial. Or, like I said, using exogenous ketones, which are just the same form of ketones that your body naturally uses. They're just made in a supplement form, and those have been shown to decrease the amount of oxygen consumption you have, so you don't get winded. And that's something that could be useful in that area.
I'll have to check it out then. So if someone, let's say, outside of the donuts, all right, I get rid of the donuts, and I wanna start a ketogenic diet, what are the things that I would have to get? Let's say a grocery store list of things that I should get.
So for me, whole eggs is number one. I think whole eggs have really good sources of fat. They're easily digestible. I usually eat whole eggs every day. The main thing you want from a ketogenic diet is your body has to be getting fat, and what's the fail of most people when they try and do this is they're not eating enough fat. It's very counterintuitive because you've been taught,
don't eat fat.
Right, bacon is bad or red meat is bad or whatever the case. And so you actually want to eat more fats in order to create these ketones that your body uses for energy, because you're not running on glucose anymore. You'll be running on these ketones. And some of your cells, like your heart cells and some parts of your brain and other muscle tissue, work better with ketones as an energy source versus glucose as an energy source. So there's plenty of data on that. And so if you're going to the grocery store, I would say whole eggs is something. I personally use cheese, and I put butter on everything. I usually get like Kerrygold, like grass-fed butter. And adding butter to something is a great way to get fats in when you need them, because a true ketogenic diet, 70% of your calories are coming from fat.
Wow.
And then 20 to 25% are coming from protein, and then 5 or less is coming from carbohydrates. So people don't really understand how much fat it really is that you're taking. Most of the foods that I eat when I follow that diet are very high in fat and very low in protein, and essentially zero carbs. Most of my carbs will come from nuts or a fibrous source if I'm eating something like vegetables that have a little bit of carbs. But for the most part, I eat some cheeses, I eat eggs, I eat some red meat. I do like bacon. Some people, depending who you talk to, say that they stay away from, bacon and sausage and the fattier pork stuff. I haven't noticed a difference really. The one thing I will say is you do want to look out for, the preservative aspect of
course,
things like that, like processed meat. But they do make organic stuff or things without nitrates and things without all the preservatives. So you have options. And like a typical meal for me or for breakfast is 5 to 6 whole eggs, a slice of cheese, American cheese, and 2 strips of bacon. So that covers my protein and that covers my fats. And then I cooked in butter, so I get the extra fats from that. And when you do a ketogenic diet, you're satiated much longer. So I usually only eat 3 times a day, maybe 4. So it works better for someone who has a busy schedule rather than the typical eating every 2-hour bodybuilder mentality. So you're eating 6 or 7 meals. Ketogenic diet, it works much differently. And that's just for performance. I mean, the health benefits are completely different.
Yeah. But is that something that, I'd say because of, say like someone has to weight cut, is that something where it's more difficult to be on a ketogenic diet and lean out, or is it something that benefits it?
So if you're in a true state of ketosis, you usually are running on fats for energy, and so you will be leaner, or hopefully you will be leaner, and you shouldn't have a lot of stored fat because your body will start to break it down for energy. With making weight versus if you have carbohydrates, I know carbohydrates store a lot of water, and so the first thing fighters probably do is drop carbs to drop the water. And so if you're in a state of ketosis, you really don't have that water that you would have with carbohydrates, and which is why bodybuilders probably don't like it, because you can't get a pump.
Yeah.
If you one of the things with a ketogenic diet is it's very, very hard to get a pump because you don't have any glycogen. And so that could be beneficial for someone like you, because you said you don't want getting pumped because it negatively affects what you're trying to do.
Yeah, I only need to get pumped when I have to go to the beach and then look like I actually work out or something.
So that's the time you carve up, right before you go to the beach.
Yeah, just see, that's the tough part. Like, I'm Italian, so I grew up on as many carbs as you could possibly get. Like, oh, you're eating here, have some pasta, have some bread, has this, that, and the other. So it took me probably a good year to get rid of pasta without feeling like a crackhead in withdrawal, because it's like, oh, you know what? It's so easy to make. It's good. You throw in like tomato sauce. It's awesome. And then this was years ago. I started taking it out. It's like, all right, I definitely feel better. But I mean, of course, the donuts here and there and stuff like that, definitely throws it off. But I think it's something that has become more and more prevalent, as far as, I wouldn't say it's like the fad diet just yet, but I definitely feel like it's getting there. And I think people are having a difficult time getting a true answer on what a true ketogenic diet is. I mean, you have more and more supplement companies are throwing like keto, like proteins and stuff like that, to throw in shakes and things like that. Is there something like, do you have something up on your, I know you had the podcast where you talked about a ketogenic diet. That was pretty good. Is there something that you would kind of forward people off to like read?
A lot of stuff online, you know, it's hit or miss. There's a scientist named Dr. Dom D'Agostino from USF. He is probably the leader forefront of ketogenic dieting with regards to not only fitness in that aspect, but also the health benefits and cancer. He's big on using the ketones to fight cancer. Initially, his research was actually for the DoD, funding for Navy SEALs that had to dive at deep levels of water that were deprived of oxygen, and you would go into seizures. And so these exogenous ketones, because you use less oxygen, prevented these divers from going into seizures. That was initially how his research started, but he's one of the guys that's on the forefront. Sean Wells is another guy that's on the forefront of ketogenic dieting and the science behind it. Tim Ferriss has had both of those guys on many times. So if you want to go to another podcast, Tim Ferriss, if he has Sean Wells or Dom D'Agostino, would be a great way to learn some of what's a true ketogenic diet, how do you get on one, stuff like that, what's the trend. But like you said, it is almost a fad right now.
Yeah.
If you look at my industry, people are coming out with, you know, these exogenous ketone products, which I do believe have a benefit, but the way they're being marketed is incorrectly. People are thinking they can go right into ketosis by taking this and still eat carbs, and that's not the case. I think that they help. They're a quick source of energy. If many people have taken MCT oil before, very similar. MCTs will convert to ketones in the body, so you get this quick source of energy that can't be stored as fat. And so if you take that when you are following a lower carb diet, I think it will help transition you, and it has been shown to have mental clarity. And because when you go into ketosis initially, when you're starting the diet, you're going from using glucose to ketones. You go through this period where people call it brain fog, I guess.
Yeah.
So your brain is trying to figure out, am I running on carbs, am I running on ketones? And so by supplementing with these exogenous ketones, that will definitely help your brain, because it will start running on ketones, and that should transition you better. Because, you know, a lot of people give up because they're like, you feel like crap for 10 days or 5 days or whatever it is. If you use these supplements, they will help mitigate that feeling, and you'll feel better, and you'll be able to focus. So that way you can concentrate on getting yourself into ketosis and stuff like that. So I don't think they don't put you into ketosis. That's not the case, but they have a purpose, and they have a place in supplementation, especially if you're on a ketogenic diet or a low carb diet.
Yeah. So that's just a whole world of different information. I think we're winding down too. I know we got to get going in a little bit, but I want to kind of go off on a couple of questions for you real quick. For nootropics, if someone wanted to test out some nootropics trial, do you have any companies that you'd want to try out or suggest to people to try out?
I used to go to a site called Powder City. They just went out of business. They were someone that sold raw powder, so you can try. There's a company called Nootropic Source that has a bunch of different nootropics out there that you can get. Like we talked about alpha GPC, CV choline. They also have some of the racetams, like phenylpiracetam and oxyracetam. There's a company called newmind.com has those as well. So those are some of the sources that sell just the plain powder, so that way you can kind of figure out which ones work for you. That's who I would go with some of those, because like I said, Powder City was the one I used to go to, but they're gone.
Yeah. Now, as far as people want to follow you on social media, Guerrilla Chemist for Instagram, right? Well,
yeah, at the Guerrilla Chemist, GUERRILLACHEMIST. Guerrilla, like guerrilla warfare.
Yeah. So definitely follow on Instagram. Follow the YouTube channel too, because you definitely put out videos pretty consistently with the Blackstone stuff.
Yes.
you have so many crazy, just out there supplements that work at people just want that good quality level stuff. I mean, you've definitely put in the work, like science wise. I know that I got to test it out, and it kind of just blew my mind. So, Bryan, thank you very much for being on here. I appreciate you taking the time. I know we got to get your workout in.
It was my pleasure. I mean, I'm just lucky to be here, and I happen to be at Flex's gym, so of course I would love to train at his facility. Not at the expense of your podcast, obviously.
No worries. No worries.
So, thank you so much for having me. Thank you for everything, facilitating, meeting Neil the other day.
No worries.
We have kind of this, you guys have this tight clique, and I'm just lucky to be even friends with all you guys. To be honest.
I feel the same way, man. Every day is like meeting somebody new. It's just, for me, it's, like picking your brain. Like, I hate texting like randomly, but like whenever I get a question, like, damn, I gotta ask Bryan this question. Just so for me, like, I'm just super humbled at the fact that I get to be surrounded by so many people that are experts in their field, and that's like my biggest thing, is that you're definitely the result of the people you surround yourself with. And for me, it's just, the other part is, like, you never want to be the smartest guy in the room. And so I know whenever I come in here, especially if you're around, like, I know I'm not the smartest guy in the room, so I just keep my mouth shut, ask questions when I can. So hopefully we can get you back here pretty soon. I know I'll be out in Texas in about a month or so. I think we have like a Houston show or something like that, so hopefully we run into each other.
Will you be at the Dallas Europa in June?
I don't know if I am or not. I find this stuff out like 2 days ahead of time. I'm the vagabond in here.
Just really quickly to comment on what you were saying, the reason why I do what I do is because of the fact there is so much bad information. So when you text me or ask me questions, the fact that you trust me and come to me, that is humbling and enough for me to answer your text. I'm not burdened when people ask me questions. I'm very flattered when people ask me questions, because that means they consider me as a reliable source of information, which is really
absolutely.
That was my whole goal with even going on social media. To be honest, I don't like social media at all. But that's why if you go on my page, there's not pictures of me. It's all just information. And so the fact that you or anyone can just ask me questions and trust that I know what I'm talking about is really what it's all about.
No, it's definitely I feel you're at the forefront of an industry that definitely prefers to stay in like in a shady aspect of it, and you're willing to put the information out there. I think it's something that you and the work that you do should definitely be commended for. So be sure you guys follow Bryan, Guerrilla Chemist. I'll put in the link, and I'll throw in a more detailed information after the podcast, so you guys have all the info. Bryan, thanks again for coming, man. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Alex.
Go get your workout, and hopefully we can do this again soon, because I know I'll have more questions once I listen to this podcast again.
Sounds good, man. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, guys, hope you enjoyed the podcast. Thank you again to the Guerrilla Chemist for taking the time out to come on to the podcast and answer all my dumb questions. I plan on having him back. He's extremely knowledgeable on so many things in regarding to fitness, nutrition, supplements, and all sorts of other stuff. I could sit there and talk to him for hours and hours just picking his brain. So please take the time to follow the Guerrilla Chemist on Instagram and on YouTube. As we stated, he puts up tons of content for free for you guys to check it out. So thank you again, Guerrilla Chemist. Thank you for Blackstone Labs for allowing him to come on the podcast. Be sure to check them out. They are not a sponsor on the podcast, but I'm more than happy to give them a shout out for all the stuff that they do. So please follow Bryan and Blackstone Labs on social media. As always, please take the time to share this podcast. Follow me on Instagram at Jiu-Jitsu Radio. And be sure to tune in to the Spotify playlist for your music for drilling and training purposes. If you have any recommendations on music, please feel free to send them my way. I will do my best to get them onto the playlist. Guys, thank you again for tuning in. Please share it with your friends, and I'll see you next time.